Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, August 1st, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the Donald Trump for President campaign, now launching their first set of advertisements in the battleground state of North Carolina. Now, less than 100 days until Election Day, you might be wondering, why is this news? Why is it news that Donald Trump's campaign is deciding to spend ads in a battleground state? But you have to take a step back. Take a look at the Donald Trump campaign over the past 6 months and the way they have been messaging to Republican strategists, to people on, the mainstream media, their own campaign. They have been very, very clear. This election for Donald Trump and those around him is not about playing defense. The Trump campaign and those closest to him, people like Chris LaSavita and Laura Trump, who runs the RNC, have been very adamant that Donald Trump is on track for victory, that he's going to win this election, and it's a question of the margin rather than if he wins this election at all. And this type of overconfidence has led the Trump campaign to make some stunning decisions, ones that I really question the validity of, really question the political motivations behind, and really question just the overall, level of intelligence that is running this campaign, because decisions that they have made, and we will talk about those decisions in just a moment, really do call into question, does the Donald Trump campaign have the same political smarts and same political motivations that they had in 2016 and arguably even back in 2020? Now, North Carolina on its own is not a bad state for either side of the aisle to be investing in, but it reveals a lot about the Trump strategy. They do not believe, or at least did not believe prior to this past week, prior to Kamala Harris entering herself into the race, that there was any reason to believe that any state Trump won, competitive or not, back in 2020 would flip to Democrats, Biden, Harris, whoever it might be, this upcoming November. And North Carolina had been front and center. North Carolina was the narrowest state that Donald Trump won back in the 2020 presidential election. He won this state by 1.3%, and it actually shifted roughly 2 points to the left relative to 2016. So many Democrats were eyeing up North Carolina and have been eyeing it up for a while. Vice President Harris had been visiting the state long before. She had been, become the presumptive nominee before Joe Biden had exited out of the race. And so North Carolina has very much been on the radar for national Democrats, including now the Kamala Harris for President campaign. But Donald Trump really didn't combat that. He visited the state a few times, was really investing heavily into that race for Mark Robinson, but beyond that, there wasn't really any concern that Donald Trump would lose a state that he won back in 2020. And arguably, that made sense. When we were looking at the electoral map and the ratings for Joe Biden relative to 2020, it very much looked like Joe Biden and the Democratic Party would only win by really a very narrow margin, if at all. It would cut through the Rust Belt. There would be no expansion of the map. A number of states would flip from being Democratic states to Republican states. And so it was all about damage control rather than an expansive electoral map. So the Trump team looked at North Carolina and said, that is not on our radar. In fact, not only were they neglecting North Carolina, they decided that they were going to invest elsewhere. And when I mean elsewhere, I mean places that were far out of the realm of possibility for the Donald Trump campaign, especially against Vice President Harris. I'm reminded very, vividly of Donald Trump's New Jersey campaign, where he said at this rally and in the weeks leading up that he would be investing his time, his energy, his supporters, his campaign funds into the state of New Jersey. He said he genuinely believes that Republicans and himself can win this state. For full context, Donald Trump lost New Jersey back in 2020 by over 15 points, nearly similar margins with Hillary Clinton on the ballot back in 2016. And yet, he decided to do an entire campaign rally there. And if you're wondering, campaign rallies can cost an upwards of $100,000 and very rarely have a high return on investment. When we talk about the Donald Trump campaign and the amount of cash that they have and how they're spending it, legal fees, useless rallies, opening up campaign field offices in states they simply cannot win. That leads me to my next point. The Donald Trump campaign also decided that it would be smart to go down into the state of New York and campaign in New York. Remember his rally in South Bronx? He also said he genuinely believed New York would be in play. And actually, many Republicans, after seeing the Democrats really collapse here in 2022, they said, now it's within the realm of possibility. I'm here to say, not for Donald Trump, and arguably even, if it didn't flip red in 2022, it is never flipping red. New Jersey is as blue and true as it gets. And so right now, Donald Trump investing his time in New Jersey and New York, holding rallies there, not a good look. But it extends even further. Holding rallies is one thing. I really think that could maybe be summed up in saying, sure, he was investing in that state, but he came into reality. but he decided to spend money, not just hold rallies, but he has been holding rallies in these states. He decided to spend money and open campaign field offices in states like Minnesota and Virginia, opening 11 offices in Virginia and opening 8 offices in Minnesota. To give you context for these states back in 2020, Minnesota went to Joe Biden by 7.1% in the last election. Right now, Kamala Harris leads in the state by, on average, according to Real Clear Politics, which leans right, very much likes to cherry pick a lot of the pollsters they bring in here, 8.5% advantage for Kamala Harris. She outpaces Joe Biden's numbers from 2020 by 1.5%. Another state he decided to invest in, I just showed you, is the state of Virginia. 11 field offices here. Well, 11 is nearly identical to the margin of victory for Joe Biden against Donald Trump here in 2020. 10.1%. A double-digit margin for Joe Biden against Donald Trump. This is where he decided to spend his time. This is where he decided to spend his money. Because at the time, and maybe even today, the Trump campaign genuinely believed they had a pathway to victory that extended far beyond what it was in 2016. Because even in 2016, Hillary Clinton won Minnesota and Hillary Clinton won Virginia. And so now this feels very reminiscent of the overly ambitious Donald Trump 2020 campaign, where they spent a lot of time trying to fight for states they were never going to win. And it backfired. Because in the final stretch of the campaign, they needed to hone in all of their resources, all of their money, all of their time into just a few battleground states because they started to lose ground elsewhere. They were spending time in New Mexico. In fact, Donald Trump announced in 2019 that he was making a play for New Mexico. He was going to be investing in the state. He started doing campaign rallies there. He started opening field offices. He started doing research about how to win the state. And yet, ultimately, Joe Biden won the state by nearly 11 points, 10.8% difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in New Mexico. A double-digit victory for Joe Biden despite all of these investments. That's how I feel about modern-day Minnesota and Virginia. And the Kamala Harris for President campaign doesn't even have those states as focus states. And you might be thinking on one end, maybe this is the mistake that Hillary Clinton made back in 2016, but I have to say, if Hillary Clinton did not lose these states, and she had a very bad performance against Donald Trump, Kamala Harris certainly will not. She is far outpacing Hillary Clinton in polling data. She is far outpacing Joe Biden in Minnesota. The most recent Survey USA poll shows her up 10 points. Biden was only up by 7 when he won that state. Right? So you're seeing that Minnesota is showing some very favorable results for Kamala Harris at the same time. These states in every election, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022, have shown time and time again that they are Democratic states. Donald Trump investing in these states goes to show that his political knowledge, the political instincts of the campaign are not what they used to be. And so North Carolina coming into this, in a way to some Republicans, might seem like a breath of fresh air. But it certainly shows a change in campaign strategy, one that the Donald Trump campaign had never even envisioned. It proves they are genuinely fearful about losing North Carolina. They see all this hype around Vice President Harris, and this hype is actually backed up by some really good data points for the Kamala Harris for President campaign. Morning Consult released a brand new set of polls with Bloomberg that shows Kamala Harris pulling ahead in a number of key battleground states, but specific to North Carolina. I guess it's not going to load here. There's 4,000 something pages here. Point being that in the most recent Morning Consult poll, Donald Trump only leads Kamala Harris by 2 points statewide, and in a multi-way race by just a singular point. Back in 2020, Donald Trump won that state by 1.3%. All of a sudden, it narrows up. If you're interested in seeing what Biden was up or down against Donald Trump in North Carolina, he was down the day he dropped out, 7 points in the most recent poll, and on average, 5.7%. Kamala Harris has effectively taken this state and shifted it 4 points to the left relative to the average against Biden. 4 points to the left. If that momentum continues, North Carolina has a very real shot of flipping blue. So the Trump campaign is trying to get out there, characterize a story around Kamala Harris. They are actually worried, and this is revealing it. Because for a long time, this past 6 months, they have been putting on a very good front. A front that I think many of us were able to see through, because it is very clear that this is not going to be a slam dunk election for either side of the aisle. But the Trump campaign has been putting on this front that this election is going to be a slam dunk for Donald Trump, and that they weren't going to have to spend time investing in states like North Carolina. They weren't going to have to spend time investing in states that are, Iowa and Ohio. And for the most part, they've been right about some of those states because Democrats aren't even investing in those states, but they are investing in North Carolina. And it's a change in tune, and also goes to show that Donald Trump is actually fearful that Democrats could flip North Carolina. Because Democrats on their own is not at all noteworthy that they're investing in North Carolina. It's sort of like the Republican Party's Nevada, right? Democrats consistently win Nevada. Republicans always say it's our year, it's our year, it's our year. They never end up winning it. North Carolina has largely been that way, except 2008. Democrats are trying to turn 2024 into another 2008, and they could very well do it. But right now, it's going to take a lot. And it would take, in some cases, the Donald Trump campaign pulling out of advertisements out of states. They only do that in two circumstances, and we saw it happen in 2020. They pulled out ads out of Iowa. They pulled ads out of Ohio in two cases. One, it means they're giving up the state. We saw that with John McCain in Michigan back in 2008. We saw that with the Trump campaign in the final stretch, focusing their advertisements, focusing their money on states they genuinely believed were more competitive. So states like Georgia and Arizona went at the forefront, whereas investing in states like Michigan, New Hampshire, and Minnesota came last, right? And so you saw that Biden had the best performances in those states. Why? Because in a way, that is the Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself pulling out of a state that they're deciding to give to Joe Biden in the event, or now in this case, Kamala Harris, in the event they go elsewhere. Another circumstance would be, like we saw in Iowa and Ohio back in 2020, was that the numbers here are already strong enough for Trump that no matter what he does in the final week, final 2 weeks, final 3 weeks of the campaign, he's going to win the state. I imagine that means that they're not going to spend money in Ohio at all, right? He's up 10 points in 2020. We saw Biden leading in the polls in some cases. By election day, we saw that Trump was leading in Ohio, but largely speaking, it was supposed to be far more competitive. And so the Trump team responded accordingly. This time around, we're seeing far less competition in states like Iowa and Ohio, but far more competition in other states. We're seeing that Kamala Harris is making up the margin. We're seeing that Kamala Harris is making improvements. And so North Carolina really is no different here, but the problem was that in a Trump versus Biden rematch, there was no need. There was no need. Again, it was locked in for Donald Trump. There was no circumstance in which Joe Biden was winning North Carolina. But there is a circumstance today in which Kamala Harris is winning. But the Donald Trump campaign doesn't seem to learn too much from even their own political decisions. Now investing in North Carolina as one of the first sets of ads that we are seeing from the Trump campaign in a unified front against Kamala Harris. Because now, J.D. Vance is planning to campaign in Virginia. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are campaigning in Minnesota, actively are campaigning in Minnesota. They are spending their time in parts of this country where, quite frankly, I do not see a pathway forward for victory. Whereas the Kamala Harris campaign, and we can see this, they just announced, and I talked about it in my Battleground State Tour video yesterday, about how Kamala Harris's campaign is announced with their running mate. They are doing what we call a Battleground State Tour. They're going to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania next Tuesday. We're going to see who she announces, what it's going to be. It's going to be very interesting to watch because it's going to be the most monumentous rally likely of this campaign season. Then she's going to Detroit, Michigan. And then she's going to Western Wisconsin. Then she's going down to Savannah, Georgia, and Raleigh, North Carolina, and Phoenix, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada. The Trump team, they're headed off to Minnesota. They're headed off to Georgia, too. Don't get them wrong. They're headed off to Pennsylvania. But they're also headed off to some of these states that don't make sense. They're planning to campaign in Virginia. They're planning to campaign elsewhere. They're trying to expand this map and working under the same assumption they were working under against Biden, but in reality, we are no longer in that circumstance. They are recognizing that North Carolina is competitive. They are recognizing, and very fearful it seems, that they are going to lose that state. Because I can guarantee you this. The Trump campaign tomorrow can announce they're running ads to the same extent that Kamala Harris is running ads in Minnesota, in Virginia. They can say, we're running ads in Minnesota and Virginia the same way that Kamala Harris is in North Carolina. And Democrats will not respond accordingly. They will not respond the way the Trump team did in North Carolina. Because believe it or not, a 7-point margin is far bigger than a 1.3% margin, regardless of what members of the right wing would like you to believe. They have been built up on this idea that this election is theirs with no one able to take it away, and Kamala Harris walks in 10 days into a campaign and does take it away. It's unlike anything we've ever seen, but they're responding. They're recognizing that this is a very real threat to their possibility of a second Trump term. And so they're trying to do everything they can to combat that, but it completely negates any of these any or all of these conversations or statements or guises of confidence that the Trump campaign has, that they do not have to play defense. Because some of their first moves of this campaign season against Kamala Harris is playing defense. No more real offense for the Trump team. Very obviously, they're going to go for some battleground states because they can't win without them. They can't win without playing offense. But at the same time, this is no longer the slam dunk election that the Donald Trump campaign genuinely believed it was going to be. And now they're spending time, resources, and effort in a state that Democrats and Republicans, in some cases Democrats, mostly Republicans, believed that was not even in the realm of possibility for the Democrats to flip. Now, it's entirely within the realm of possibility. Kamala Harris narrowing up this race has forced Donald Trump to spend money, time, and resources in states he otherwise would not have against Joe Biden. And that's an overall big plus for the Kamala Harris campaign, even if she does not win North Carolina. Because should she win this election by similar margins that Donald Trump won by in 2016 or Joe Biden won by in 2020, that will show that just that few $1 million or $10-20 million spent in a state like North Carolina, when you lose Democrats winning Wisconsin by 10-20,000 votes, that's where that money could have made all the difference. But Democrats ultimately came out ahead. The new fundraising numbers out today, Kamala Harris out fundraising Donald Trump in the month of July. Very good numbers for the for the Kamala Harris team. It's going to be a very fascinating election to watch. Less than 20 days until the Democratic National Convention, or actually, around 20 days until the Democratic National Convention. It's going to be a very, very long trip. It's going to be a very long campaign season, but a very fun one to watch nonetheless. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist of my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.